There's a specific kind of silence that only exists between two people who built something together, and both know it's about to end. Cole slid the folder across the conference table, like he was doing me a favor. Didn't look up when he did it, just pushed it forward with 2 fingers and leaned back in his chair like a man who had already decided how the next 10 minutes were going to go. I looked at the number on the first page. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so far below what the company was worth that my brain needed a second to confirm what my eyes were reading. "That's the offer," Cole said. "It's fair given where things are." I remember thinking, given where things are, like the company had arrived at some neutral, unfortunate place on its own. Like the weather. Like nobody made any decisions that got us to this table. I picked up the pen. I don't know why. Muscle memory, maybe. Or maybe because some part of me still trusted him. Still believed that 11 years of building something together meant the number on that page had to make sense somehow. And I just wasn't seeing it yet. I held the pen for probably 4 seconds. Then I put it down. I still can't tell you exactly what stopped me. Some small thing. A wrong detail in a number I'd seen before. A rounding that didn't round right. Whatever it was, I put the pen down, closed the folder, and said I needed a few days to review. Cole's expression didn't change. That's what I should have noticed. He wasn't surprised at all. Let me tell you how Mercer and Davenport Advisory Group actually started. Not the version Cole told clients at dinner. Not the cleaned-up LinkedIn origin story where 2 visionaries met and built something extraordinary. The real version. I was 27 with $40,000 saved from 3 years of grinding at a mid-sized consulting firm, where I was consistently the youngest person in the room and consistently the one doing the work that older, louder people got credit for. I knew the industry. I knew the clients. I knew exactly what the market was missing because I had spent 3 years watching my bosses fail to deliver it while still somehow getting paid. Cole has been my best friend since college. Smart, magnetic. The kind of guy who could walk into a room full of strangers and walk out with 4 business cards and 2 dinner invitations. I had the strategy. He had the room. It felt like the most natural partnership in the world. I put in the $40,000. Cole put in $15,000 and a promise to handle business development. I wrote the service frameworks. I built the first 3 client proposals. I did the delivery on every single early project while Cole worked the phones, the lunches, and the networking events. That was the deal, and for the first 2 years it worked. Then, something shifted. So slowly, I kept finding reasons to explain it away. It started in client meetings. Cole began prefacing things with, "My vision for this company," instead of "our vision." Small thing. I noticed it once and let it go. Then it became every meeting. Then it became the way he introduced himself at industry events. Cole Davenport, founder of Mercer and Davenport. Not co-founder. Founder. I brought it up once over lunch, and he laughed it off, said I was being sensitive, said nobody was keeping score. I let it go, kept working. Then came the decisions. Cole started overriding calls I'd already made with clients, not in private, in rooms full of people. I'd set a project direction, communicate it clearly, and Cole would walk in 2 days later and redirect it as my version had never existed. When I pushed back, he had a way of tilting his head slightly and saying, "Nate, let's not make this weird," in a tone that made me feel like the problem in the room. I started second-guessing myself. Started wondering if I was too deep in the operational weeds to see the bigger picture he was supposedly seeing. He was good at making you feel that way, like your instincts were small and his instincts were strategic. Meanwhile, our 3 best employees, Derek in operations, Jared Osei in client services, and Lisa, who ran our accounts, all started having closed-door meetings with Cole that I wasn't invited to. When I asked Jared once what they were discussing, he said Cole was just doing culture check-ins. I believed him. I went back to work. The thing about being betrayed slowly is that the evidence was never hidden. It was just reframed. Every single time. It was a Thursday afternoon when Phil Granger called me. Phil ran a mid-sized logistics company out of Cincinnati and had been one of our anchor clients for 4 years. Reliable, low maintenance, paid on time. The kind of client you build a business around. He called my cell directly, which he hadn't done in months, and the first thing he said was, "Hey Nate, just wanted to make sure we're still on the same page after the meeting last week." I didn't know what meeting he was talking about. I kept my voice completely neutral, asked him to walk me through what was discussed so I could make sure my notes matched his. Phil spent 10 minutes describing a strategic realignment conversation he'd had with Cole, alone, off-site, at a restaurant I'd never been to. Cole had apparently told Phil that Mercer and Davenport was going through a structural evolution, and that his account would be handled differently going forward. Phil assumed I knew. Phil assumed it was a joint decision. I told Phil we'd follow up in writing by the end of the week. I hung up and sat completely still for about 90 seconds. Then I called Cole. He answered on the second ring, relaxed, like a man with nothing to manage. I told him Phil had called. There was a pause, half a second, maybe less. And then Cole laughed and said Phil had reached out to him directly about some concerns, and he didn't want to bother me because I was heads down on the Harmon Group deliverable. He said it was nothing. Said he was just doing relationship maintenance. Said I should trust him on the client side because that was always his lane. I said okay, but I didn't hang up right away. And in that silence, Cole said, "Don't make it weird, Nate," and then ended the call himself. That phrase again. That night, I went into our shared accounting portal for the first time in 4 months. I'd been so buried in delivery work that I'd handed Cole the financial oversight by default. Not formally, just gradually. The way you stop checking something because it was always fine before. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was just looking. The vendor invoice was for a company called Apex Stream Solutions, listed as a software infrastructure provider. Monthly charge of $4,200 had been running for 14 months. I didn't recognize the name, but we had a lot of tools, and I'd stopped tracking every subscription personally. I Googled it. Nothing came up. No website, no LinkedIn, no reviews, no presence of any kind. A company charging us $4,200 a month didn't exist on the internet. I wrote the name down on a piece of paper, folded it, and put it in my jacket pocket. I didn't say a word to Cole. I just started paying attention differently. The email came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I was still at my desk finishing a client report when my phone lit up. The sender was David Park, procurement lead at Fenwick Logistics, a company we'd been courting for 8 months. Good account, significant contract. Cole had been handling the relationship personally, which I had accepted because client development was his lane. That's what he always said. His lane. The subject line was Final terms. Davenport Edge Consulting. I stared at that subject line for a long time before I opened it. The thread was 6 emails deep. Cole had been negotiating a 24-month retainer with Fenwick Logistics. The pitch deck attached to the third email in the chain used 4 case studies, 4 projects I had personally delivered for Mercer and Davenport clients. My methodologies, my frameworks, my results. One of them was the Harmon Group project I had been heads down finishing that very week. Cole had taken work I hadn't even completed yet and used it to sell a contract under a completely different company. Davenport Edge Consulting. I had never heard that name before that moment. I sat there reading the thread twice, then a third time. Then I opened a new browser tab and looked up the LLC registration. Davenport Edge Consulting. Registered 14 months ago. Sole owner, Cole Aaron Davenport. Registered agent address, a law office in the financial district I didn't recognize. I wrote down the law firm name. Then I went back to the accounting portal and pulled every transaction for the past 18 months. I wasn't casual about it this time. I built a spreadsheet, line by line, every vendor, every subscription, every outgoing payment that didn't have a clear paper trail back to a real deliverable. Apex Stream Solutions was the biggest. $4,200 a month for 14 months. $8,800 total, paid like clockwork. But there were others. A company called Bridgepoint Tech Services. Another called Laurel Management Group. None of them had any internet presence. None of them appeared on any invoice that corresponded to actual work delivered to actual clients. By 2 a.m., I had identified $94,000 in payments to vendors that did not exist. I closed the laptop. I walked to my kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood at the window for a long time looking at nothing. The thing that hit me hardest wasn't the money. It was the Harmon Group case study in that pitch deck. I had been working 18-hour days for 3 weeks on that project. Cole had texted me twice that week asking for progress updates. I thought he was being a supportive partner. He was checking whether the asset he was about to steal was ready. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't call Cole. I called my personal accountant at 8 a.m. and told him I needed a forensic accounting referral. That was the last morning I pretended not to know. The forensic accountant's name was Gerald Tate, referred by my personal accountant as someone who finds things people buried carefully. He was 58, wore the same gray cardigan both times I met him, and spoke as if every word cost him something. I liked him immediately. I gave him full access to everything: the portal, the vendor list, the spreadsheet I'd built at 2 a.m., the Fenwick email thread. He told me to say nothing to Cole and come back in 10 days. I came back at 8. Gerald laid 3 documents on the table between us, without introduction. The first was the Davenport Edge Consulting LLC registration. Incorporation date: 1 month and 11 days after Cole and I had signed our original partnership agreement. I sat with that for a moment. We had celebrated that signing. Gone out to dinner. Cole had given a toast about building something that lasts. 39 days later, he filed for his exit. The second document was a series of emails Gerald had recovered through our shared server. Correspondence between Cole and a lawyer named Patrick Hess at a firm called Hess and Doral. The emails were dated 26 months ago. They outlined a structured buyout strategy. Wait until Mercer and Davenport crossed $2.1 million in annual revenue. Manufacture an operational dispute. Offer a buyout at 30% below market valuation, citing partnership deterioration, and use the dissolution clause in our original agreement to force a fast close before I could get independent counsel. We had crossed $2.1 million in revenue 11 weeks ago. The folder Cole had slid across the table with 2 fingers. That wasn't an offer. That was the execution of a 2-year-old plan. The third document was a summary of total financial exposure. Shadow payroll through ghost vendors. Misappropriated company funds were used to finance Davenport Edge operations. Client contracts migrated using proprietary company assets. Gerald's conservative estimate, $340,000. His aggressive estimate, closer to $480,000. I asked Gerald one question. I asked him if any of this was recoverable legally. He looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "Every single dollar, and then some." I drove home, didn't turn on the radio, didn't call anyone. Cole thought he was 2 weeks from winning. He had no idea I was already 3 moves ahead. The call came on a Wednesday at 7:43 a.m. My personal accountant, Ron Briefly, didn't open with small talk. He said, "Nate, I need you to listen carefully and not react until I finish." That's how I knew it was bad. The shared business line of credit, a $280,000 facility taken out jointly in both our names 3 years ago, was 61 days delinquent. The bank had already sent 2 notices, both to the office address. Cole managed the office mail. I had never seen a single notice. Ron walked me through the withdrawal history. Over 14 months, Cole had drawn $210,000 from the credit line. Small pulls at first. $8,000 here, $12,000 there. Then, the larger ones as he got comfortable. The money had gone into an account Ron couldn't trace from his end, but I already knew the name of. Davenport Edge Consulting. Cole had been financing his parallel company with a credit line that was attached to my personal credit score. If it defaulted, and it was weeks from defaulting, it wouldn't just hurt. It would follow me for years. Future financing, future clients, future everything. I thanked Ron, hung up, and opened my laptop. I found the dissolution paperwork filed with the state 3 weeks prior. Cole had listed irreconcilable operational differences as the grounds. The filing was timed with surgical precision. Our largest contract, a 14-month retainer with a healthcare group called Aldrin Medical, was up for renewal in 19 days. The moment the dissolution was finalized, Cole could approach Aldrin as a free agent, present Davenport Edge, and flip the contract before I had legal standing to stop anything. 19 days, not months, not weeks, in any comfortable sense. 19 mornings. I called my lawyer at 8 a.m. Not the one who had done our partnership agreement. A different one. A woman named Sandra Okafor, who a friend had described as the person you call when the other side already has a lawyer and you didn't know there was a war. She answered on the third ring. I said, I need an emergency injunction, a fraud claim, and I need to know how fast we can freeze shared assets before a dissolution filing activates. She said, come in today. I was in her office by 10 a.m. Sandra Okafor's office had no decorations, no diplomas on the wall, no plants, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a woman who took notes in handwriting so small it looked like code. She read through everything I brought without a single facial expression. And when she finished, she closed the folder and said, he made 3 criminal mistakes and about 9 civil ones. Let's use all of them. We moved in a specific order. Sequence mattered. One wrong move in the wrong direction, and Cole would feel the ground shift and start hiding things faster than we could freeze them. First, Sandra filed an emergency motion to freeze all shared Mercer and Davenport accounts pending fraud investigation. Granted within 48 hours. Cole's access to company funds, gone. He didn't know yet. The freeze happened quietly at the banking level, with no notification requirement until the motion was served. We had a window. Second, Sandra's colleague filed the personal credit liability separation with supporting documentation of unauthorized withdrawals. Every transaction Gerald Tate had identified went into that filing. The credit line default exposure was formally documented as Cole's sole liability. My credit score was walled off before the default could land on it. Third, the cease and desist went to Davenport Edge Consulting, citing theft of proprietary client data, unauthorized use of company case studies and intellectual property, and misappropriation of company funds to finance a competing entity. Simultaneously, Sandra reported the shadow payroll ghost vendors to the IRS. Davenport Edge Consulting was now under 2 simultaneous investigations before it had signed a single public contract. That was the infrastructure. Then came the part that required me personally. I visited every major client we had. Not with a lawyer, not with a document package, just me, in person, one conversation at a time. I didn't go in angry. I didn't go in desperation. I went in as the person who had actually built the work they'd been paying for. I showed Phil Granger at the logistics company, the original proposal I'd written for his account 4 years ago. My handwriting in the margins. My frameworks. I showed Aldrin Medical's procurement director the delivery records. Every report, every presentation, every result, all produced under my direct oversight. I showed each client exactly what Cole had been planning to sell them, using assets that were never his to sell. I didn't say Cole betrayed me. I didn't have to. I just showed them the work and let them do the math. Every single client confirmed in writing that they would be renewing with Mercer and Davenport under my management. Aldrin Medical sent their confirmation email on a Friday afternoon, 19 days after I'd found the dissolution paperwork, with 1 day to spare. That evening, I sat in my car in the parking garage outside Sandra's office for a long time. Cole had scheduled his client flip meeting for the following Monday morning. I didn't cancel it for him. I let him prepare all weekend. Monday morning, Cole walked into the Mercer and Davenport conference room at 9 a.m. dressed like a man closing a deal. New suit, fresh haircut, A stack of Davenport Edge consulting folders is arranged neatly at the head of the table. He had reserved the room through the shared calendar system, which still worked because I hadn't touched it. I wanted him to be comfortable. I wanted him to be prepared. I wanted him to have spent the entire weekend rehearsing a presentation for an audience that was never going to show up. The clients didn't come. Their assistants had already sent polite cancellations late Friday afternoon. No explanations offered. Just regrets. Cole sat in that room alone for 40 minutes before he started making calls. I know this because Jared Osei told me. Jared had been in the office that morning, watching through the glass partition, and what he described was a man whose entire performance had no stage. Cole made 7 calls in those 40 minutes. Clients, vendors, contacts. Nobody answered. The ones who did were brief and professional and non-committal in the way people are when they already know something you don't. At 10:15 a.m., the process server walked into the building. Sandra had timed it precisely. The cease and desist, the fraud claim documentation, and the formal notice of frozen shared assets were served to Cole personally while he was still sitting at the head of his own carefully arranged table. In the building he thought he was about to take, surrounded by folders with his name on them. Jared said Cole read the first page 3 times. That afternoon, Jared called me. Not Cole. Me. He asked if we could meet privately, and I said yes, and he came to my apartment that evening with a laptop and an expression that sat somewhere between guilt and relief. He opened the laptop and showed me 14 months of internal emails between himself and Cole. Meeting notes, instructions, a paper trail of every decision Cole had made to systematically dismantle my position inside my own company. Jared had kept copies of everything. He said he'd started keeping them 8 months ago when Cole had casually mentioned that, when the transition happens, Jared's role would be significantly reduced. Cole had been planning to cut the people who helped him once he didn't need them anymore. Jared gave me everything. Signed a witness statement for Sandra that same night. 2 days later, Patrick Hess, at Hess and Doral, quietly withdrew as Cole's legal counsel. No public statement. Just a formal notice of withdrawal filed with the court. When your own lawyer walks away mid-case, it means he looked at the evidence and decided the association wasn't worth it. Cole called me on a Thursday evening. I let it ring. He called again on Friday morning. I let it ring. He texted at 11 a.m. The message said, "Nate, we need to talk, please." I read it, put my phone face down on the desk, let him sit in the silence he had spent 3 years building for me. Cole came to my apartment on a Saturday morning. I hadn't invited him. He just showed up, which told me everything about where he was, desperate enough to appear at my door unannounced after 2 years of surgical, calculated patience. The man who had blueprinted my removal down to the revenue threshold was now standing in a hallway ringing a doorbell. I let him in because I wanted to see it up close. He looked like he hadn't slept in 4 days. The new suit was gone. He was in a jacket he'd owned since we were 29, and his eyes had that particular hollowness that comes not from sadness, but from the specific terror of watching something you built entirely on deception begin to legally unravel in real time. He sat down without being asked. He started with an explanation. I let him go for about 90 seconds, before I understood that the explanation was actually an appeal, a reframing where the last 3 years had been a misunderstanding, a reaction to feeling undervalued, a situation that had escalated beyond what he intended. He used the word complicated 4 times in 3 minutes. He did not use the word sorry once. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I just watched him talk. When he finished, I said one thing. I said, "Phil Granger called me. You told him I was handling things incorrectly." Cole opened his mouth. I said, "Don't make it weird, Cole." The room went completely silent. He understood what I'd just done. I watched it land on his face in slow motion. The callback, the reversal. 11 years of dismissal compressed into 5 words, handed back to him in the exact tone he had used on me 100 times. His jaw tightened. He looked at the floor. Then I slid a folder across the table. Not with 2 fingers, with my full hand, flat on the table. The way you put something down that you want someone to feel the weight of. Inside was Sandra's settlement demand. Full market valuation buyout of my stake in Mercer and Davenport. Personal liability assignment for the full credit line default. Repayment schedule for the $340,000 in misappropriated funds. Formal dissolution of any claim Cole had to company's intellectual property, client relationships, or case study materials. And a non-disclosure agreement that would keep the IRS referral and fraud documentation from becoming public, contingent entirely on full compliance. Cole picked up the folder, read it slowly, put it down. He said, "This is everything." I said, "Yes." He said, "You'll really walk away from the company." I said, "I already did, 3 weeks ago." He signed it that afternoon. Every page, every line. No negotiation. Because Sandra had made sure there was nothing left to negotiate with. The frozen accounts, the IRS investigation, the withdrawn counsel, the witness statement from Jared, the client confirmations. All of it sitting in a file with his name on it and nowhere to go except forward or into a courtroom. The wire transfer cleared the following Tuesday. I didn't celebrate. Didn't call anyone. Didn't post anything. I sat at my kitchen table with a coffee that had gone cold and thought about the $40,000 I had saved over 3 years at 27 years old, and how certain I had been that I'd finally found the right person to build something with. I hadn't been wrong about the idea, just the partner. 3 months later, I opened a new LLC, single owner, no partners. The first client I signed was Phil Granger. He called me directly.